Welcome back, everyone, to part 4 with us, No Spoon. And today
we are discussing the album, the lyrics, the concepts of the lyrics, the story, and this, that, and the third.
Yeah. That what I just said implied that we've been doing this multiple days, but this is in fact been the same day, the same night. Maybe I'm tired.
We haven't just break the illusion, guys.
We haven't just been coming back all in the same outfits.
I only have one shirt.
Pit stains and
yeah, that smells good.
So
welcome back to part 4. Where we're going to wrap things up and talk about our interpretations of the themes of the album, starting with "Back Yet Forward."
Yep.
All right.
Word.
What you got, Peter?
So, Back Yet Forward is basically the main character. I guess this would be going back to his younger self and, like, righting all of his wrongs. Like, making sure he's taking time to spend with, like, Simpson's daughter, like, saving Simpson in the beginning. Basically doing everything that he didn't do in his, like, obsession over creating the Opus, so that way he can actually complete said Opus.
Just about.
I'll be god danged. All right.
Yeah.
PW on the money tonight.
You're not fired. This is great.
That's pretty nail on the head. So it starts off with him waking up from a dream, right? He has this dream and it startles him awake, and he wakes up an hour earlier than he normally would.
We should mention that this is no longer 70-year-old protagonist. This is younger self that was mentioned, like, in the end of Within the Realm, that they were going to send this message, this thought, forward to the next loop version of the protagonist. So this is younger protagonist, like the beginning of the album again.
Boy, these sirens are killing me, I swear.
Yeah, as you can hear, the protagonist had a heart attack and he's being driven to the hospital.
Sorry if you can hear that. If not, completely ignore what we're saying.
Yep.
But yeah, at the end of Within the Realm, he actually finally decides, you know what? It's better if I pass on what I have, right? And so he sends it back to the next loop, or his younger self, or however you want to interpret it. And the opening of Back Yet Forward is that younger self waking from that dream. Yeah. Or what he perceived to be a dream.
Yeah.
Right?
Was it a dream? Was it all real? Who can say?
The world may never know.
I'm ashamed of y'all for not harmonizing.
Right.
Oh, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Da, da, da.
That's better. Yeah.
Okay. And I think Paul already alluded to it. Like, the events that take place during Back Yet Forward is all of the things that he's been missing out on throughout the album, right? He gets up an hour earlier just in time to run down and stop Simpson from going into his room, which is where they find him dead at the beginning of the record.
Yep. He's able to sort of begin to have the relationships that he sort of wishes he was able to have, referenced in Dance With Me, both with Simpson's daughter, sort of like, you know, playing with her, entertaining her, something which admittedly is not quite as dire since Simpson is now not dead. And then, you know, having a relationship with the girl his own age, and sort of being able to experience more of life, and then ultimately leading to him deciding, like, okay, things are already going significantly better than what happened in my dream. Now it's time for me to sit down and see if I can actually finish the Opus. And again, the sort of implication here for me is that him stop it, like, having learned from the dream that he needed to stop and take time for the people around him and experience life and relationships, he's actually finally able to complete the Opus. He's able to finish it and then, you know, taking it downstairs, waving it, and being like, "Ta-da! I finished it!
Look what I can do."
So, it's definitely like there's a lot of sort of victory, but also urgency in the song. There's the urgency of like, you know, I have seen how things go wrong, and I need to undo that. And it feels like there's a sense of like time sensitivity to
It's like
it.
an eye opener that the original protagonist never got until it's too late.
It's a time of action.
Right. And it is therefore a very action-packed song,
Yeah.
Right.
musically.
Yeah.
It's definitely like probably some of the highest energy,
Yeah.
like
for
just
sure.
momentum and drive and definitely oomph, you know. It's all there. Balls to the wall from beginning to end for that track. There's no slowing down once you get on that train.
Oh yeah. It's definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah. And finally, you know, by the end, lyrically, he's saying that he's essentially done it. He's accomplished it. Everything is now as it was meant to be. And it's just a huge moment of triumph after all of the almost hours worth of struggle that, you know, you've sort of gone through in the album up to that point.
Yeah. No surprise here. We're all suckers for a happy ending, I think.
Yeah, I definitely think there is maybe an inclination at some point that we might introduce a twist just for the hell of it, like sort of like a la other great prog concept albums like Scenes from a Memory, where like the very end, after, you know, the protagonist of that thinks he's sort of realized how things are, then all of a sudden it's like the psychotherapist turns out he was a reincarnation, and he kills the protagonist again, restarting the loop. Very, very fun twist. Or Mercy Falls.
Spoiler alert if you haven't listened to it.
Yeah, it's not like the album didn't like come out in 1999 or something. Or Mercy Falls, where like that's when the wife reveals to the husband that she had an affair, and that caused him to go into shock, and that's why they crashed the car or something. We thought about including a twist just because there is this sort of rich history of, you know, people in our shoes doing that. But honestly, after like the album is an hour and 11 minutes long, it's others have said it. I'll acknowledge it's a hefty listen. Like, you're gonna be tired by the end of it.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's something really cool about actually granting the consumer of a piece of media like
an ending.
Like an ending that feels
no
good.
sequel baiting.
I'm sort of like, I'm inclined to think of something like The Lord of the Rings. You know, where, you know, people, when they take the scene out of context, obviously people like to look at some of the ending scenes from Return of the King, you know, like Frodo waking up in the bed or whatever, and they say it like looks cheesy. But let me tell you, especially if you've marathoned the the extended editions like we have
in one day,
by the time that scene hits,
God,
there is nothing better. And so I think we kind of decided this was what this album needed to have. After you've gone through, like, I've heard people say that this album is like exhausting to listen to, because we do kind of throw, like, even the softer songs have this like edge of like, it keeps you on the edge of your seat, and then the songs with energy, you know, it's like hard to catch a breath or whatever. Yeah, by the time you get to the end of the album, it's like, I didn't necessarily think it was fair for us to throw some kind of dark twist at the listener.
And personally, I think having a satisfying conclusion adds to some of the themes that we're going to talk about here in a minute, right? Like, I liked some of the morals that we accidentally stumbled into in the story, and I think it might tarnish, like, the completeness and the wholeness of some of those ideas if we were to create a twist.
Yeah.
Right? That, because at least for me, some of the things, like one of the things you already discussed on was the idea that you can't write good music unless you've lived life, right? Unless you have something to reference. I believe that to my core. Like, to me, that is a staple of what this album is talking about. And I love that. And I think by creating a twist and showing that, oh, it's not over, it's not final, oh, something weird might still happen, I think it would tarnish that idea, that maybe that idea would also be called into question because he didn't succeed. It's not over. And I personally wouldn't want that.
Yeah.
I want people to, if that is a theme that somebody gets out of this record, which is definitely intended, I think, I want that to be a finality. Because that's what I believe. I believe that if you want to write good music, you have to have something to say. And if you don't have any life experience, you don't really have a whole lot to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before we get into the themes, I know I jumped the gun a little bit. The final track is basically just a victory track, right?
Pretty much. The House of the Beginning. It's like, it's musically a reprise of The House at the End. They're both sort of meant to act as bookends to the album. So this one it's kind of that wrapping up, like, again, sort of like I mentioned in the first video, part 1. If you picture this as a musical, this one is that final scene when everyone's out on stage and everyone's once again singing to the audience. You're sort of breaking the fourth wall again. You're acknowledging this is the end of the story. We've come so far. We've done this and we've done that, and we've sort of come out on the other side. And it's a big old victory song. Just sort of reiterating some of the feelings of victory that we hit at the end of Back Yet Forward. But again, like, musically, it's largely the same as The House at the End, just reimagined in a different time signature and with a different arrangement and obviously different lyrics and stuff.
It is my favorite song on the album.
Absolutely. That, and what I was referring to with the giving people that satisfactory, like, good feeling at the end of it, like, this is the song that does that. This is the song that gives you that moment of, like, like, oh my god, I needed this after that entire
I won't lie
album.
to you guys. The first time, like, I heard the album all the way through, like, by the time I got to that song, I was tearing up.
The first 10 times.
All of us, for sure.
Yeah, I guess we
I
can
don't
thank Lord of the
think-
Rings.
A little bit of context for you guys. In order to get the mix right on this, we would actually play it on all sorts of different kinds of speakers. One of which we would bounce out a mix onto our Google Drive, and we would go and plug it into my car because I have a large family vehicle with a decent sound system. We'd listen in there, and I remember for the couple weeks that we did that, every time we would listen to the whole thing, I don't think I'd make it through the end without getting misty-eyed. Like, especially after Lakeview Drive, the final words, this big
The reprise of the Implosion Overture theme.
It's just so good.
Which in
And
that
it's
context,
so
yeah.
big and epic, and it's
Yeah.
supposed to be this huge trumpeting, triumphant,
Imagine if the listener feels this way after, an hour and 11 minutes of music. I think something that made it even more significant for us listening to those final mixes, before we said, this is it, it's done, and we released it, is that, again, we had been working on this album for 7 years, and we'd gone through so much stuff, lineup changes. We went through COVID, we went through a pandemic with all of this, having to be apart, not seeing each other in person. We'd been through, like, relationship changes, like, at least one of us got married during this, like, 7-year span. And
What
so
happened?
to sit there in the car listening to this final mix and to hear those final notes, it really, like, it wasn't just, it didn't just feel like the bookend of an hour and 11 minutes, but the bookend of 7 years.
Yeah.
So it was very
Yeah.
significant.
The victory song of The House at the Beginning felt like the victory song of life at that point. You know, like it felt like my victory. That's what I
Absolutely.
felt like when I listened to
It's
it.
it was a very personal thing. Which honestly, I think for me contributed to the idea of us, starting fresh as a new name.
Yeah.
As No Spoon, us creating the entity of No Spoon, because I think something that big, something that commemorative deserved, the prestige of being its own thing.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be, quite the decision for us, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
So I don't mind if this runs a little bit long if we need to. Let's touch on. We already dabbled in it a little bit with the talk earlier, but I want to touch on some of the overarching themes, some of the things this album, whether we intended it or not, what did you guys get from it? And I think I want each of us to get one. And since Cole and I are kind of the more verbose, long in the tooth as far as talking about this stuff. I wanna hear from-
Loquacious.
right? James, Paul, take it away, man.
Well, for me, like the theme that sticks with me the most is the theme of obsession, because that is not only like a major theme of the album, but the big theme of making the album. At least for me, for 7 long years of just like retracking and trying to write parts and lineup changes and all these other things, it's all I thought about. Like in a way, I kind of feel like the character, because like nothing else really mattered to me that much. Like I felt. For 7 years, it almost felt like I was trapped, because I felt like I couldn't do anything until this album was finished. And it like time felt like it got away from me. I felt like at the beginning of the album, I would see my parents and they would look a certain way. And then at the end of 7 years, I just acknowledged the passage of time from looking at them. Or my nieces are now getting out of high school. And like throughout that time, I didn't acknowledge any of it. And I didn't write hardly any new music. I think there's only one thing that Cole and I really worked on that will be on the next album, but otherwise, like I felt stuck because this album meant so much to me, and I obsessed so hard that I was paralyzed.
Well, and we couldn't really justify going and starting work on a bunch of new material with this one left unfinished. So we ended up having like a bunch of musical ideas like ready in the chamber, which is I think why progress on this next album is going quite quickly.
Yeah.
Especially compared to Opus.
Right.
And it was a good thing too during that time that I did have another creative outlet. For those of you who don't know, I also play in a band called The Reticent, and during that time, that band has gone through writing an album, and then we're currently writing 2 albums. And if I didn't have those outlets to also be creative, I don't know what would have happened.
Yeah.
Honestly. So it was 7 years of just...
The number of
I don't know what to say.
conversations that I remember we had, like, essentially fantasizing about once the album was finally going to be done, like, what things would be like, trying to envision how people would receive it and what they would think of it. It was, yeah, for what's kind of funny is for a long time, the files for the album sat in a folder on my computer entitled 2019 album. if that tells you if that tells you anything, that we fully intended to release that album in 2019, and yeah, we overshot that a little bit.
Just a little bit.
So maybe at the risk of extending this a little long, the obsession, like, do you have a critique on it? Like, here's an idea that has come to me. I know one of the themes of the album is kind of warning against, being overly obsessed, with the craft. But do you think there's a level of that is warranted in creating art or creating something of at least worth to your own self, right?
Yeah.
When you guys talk about that a lot, even with your teaching, just, like when it comes to like students, like you almost need to obsess about something a little bit if you're really wanting to dive into it and actually learn.
And I want to touch on that as like the critique of the record is not to become so obsessed that you miss out on life. But I don't want people to get the wrong idea and think that you can just kind of go at certain things willy-nilly, because I think the other story, and it plays out more through how the record came about, right, is we would not have completed Opus if we didn't expect a little bit of long suffering and hard work and, to be honest, being minorly obsessive over the excellence of the record. So the idea isn't that you don't have to dedicate your full attention to it at some point. Because I think anything you want to be good at, you do. It's going to require your whole self. But don't give your whole self your whole life. I think I really liked where you were going with that, and I wanted to, at least for me, differentiate between the two.
No, that's
so that anybody aspiring to do something like this, it's like, hey, you can and don't miss out on living life, but you're going to have to put in some hours.
Well, the truth is, I think we do kind of cover that very, very briefly, and like one tiny lyric in the last track in House of the Beginning, which is the I can create and live life too.
Yeah.
That it is possible to do both. It's possible to have an amount of healthy obsession with your craft. Like it's essentially like I agree. I think there's an encouragement to be dedicated.
Yes,
for sure. I would suppose that the warning is not so much like don't allow yourself to dive deep into something, but more just like
balance it.
Yeah, it's balance is what it really is.
I know for me, the thing that stuck out was and I'll actually end up touching a little more on this, but like I immediately thought of my family. It's like, hey, if you're devoting so much time to this, like between work and music and everything, that you never spend time with your family, you're going to miss out on that. Especially now that I have a little one. It's like, I don't want to come out of my comatose state and she be like 16.
Right.
So I think finding that balance between dedication and obsession is warranted.
Yes.
Yeah. Just say, Paul, do you have is there a
what
particular
do you got
I guess
stuck
one
out
of
to
like
you?
the biggest thing that resonates with me theme wise would just be like completion. Like, we've kind of already touched on this, the fact that the album took 7 years. There were a lot of things that we went through as like a group, that we went through individually. I mean, even with me and like the health issues I had, like I didn't think that I was going to be a part of the completion of Opus, essentially. Like I still remember, God, this has been, 2017 maybe? Like, I remember when we first started working on, like, Back Yet Forward.
Yeah.
And, like, it just seems like it was ages ago. And then, just kind of the idea that, like, shit happens in people's lives, whether it's good or bad. And it's like, at the end of the day, like, kind of keeping your eye on the prize, I guess you could say. And, like, seeing something through, like, I don't know, that's what resonated me most with this album. So like, bring it back to like us just sitting in the car listening to like to the final mix and us giving like the okay on it, it's like when you think about like everything that went into those 7 years to finish the album, it's a very rewarding feeling, I guess, when you, no matter what you're going through, to like have a goal and to set your eyes on it, and then to see that goal like come through, like it's a good feeling. So
Absolutely.
I think for me, kind of touching along the lines of what I was hinting at a minute ago, the idea of life being the thing that informs your music, and that might not always be in the way you'd think. One of the things I had to experience to realize what a gift I had in knowing you individuals and the No Spoon group, and what we actually had as a group and what we could achieve together. A little bit of band history. I had to step away from the group for a while. I already mentioned that I had a young child. And at one point in our development, things were slowing down. I was frustrated with my job. I wasn't doing so well at like dividing up my time. And so I was coming home frustrated from the music process because things weren't going all that smoothly. We were trying to learn how to mix the thing ourselves. We were trying to get a lineup change going. Paul had to step down for health reasons, and so we had to replace our drummer. We were picking up a keyboardist. We were trying all kinds of stuff, and it really slowed down and stagnated the process. And I was coming home feeling, dissatisfied with how things were going. And my wife had a conversation with me one night and was like, listen, I need you here. And I need you basically on your A game because, for those of you who are unaware, raising a child is hard. And she's like, this is the one thing that's supposed to breathe life into you. And if you're coming home dead, I'd rather you not go. And that really resonated with me, that I thought, I was done with music. So for me, I didn't know if I was going to be a part of Opus either. I thought I was going to step down from that. And it took that separation from the obsession of the thing. It took me leaving it and living a little more of a mundane life to realize what it was we had, and to get perspective into what had gone wrong. Like, why were things slowing down? Why were things stagnating? What could I have done differently? What could we as a group do to remedy this? And there was actually a bit of a come to Jesus moment, I think, not only for me, but for the group, where we actually decided to, perform the great experiment of like paring this thing down to its nuts and bolts and build it back up again, almost from scratch, but with only putting in the parts that had made us successful beforehand. And I don't think that's something I would have realized unless I had put distance away from the art. I was able to get a good look at what it was and realize that this wasn't just some group of guys, that this was the group of guys. And that I was never going to create something like an Opus without y'all. Which is part of why I get so emotional when we hear the end of that album, because to me that shows what we as a group were able to overcome, because Opus almost didn't happen, and the fact that we were able to get some distance, realize what needed fixing, and fix it. So that part of the album really stands out to me.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
For me, a lot of the themes that came out of it, the sort of story themes, morals, were ones that weren't originally intended. That just sort of like in the process of writing the lyrics, or maybe recording the vocals after the lyrics had been written, like coming to new realizations about what had happened. Like, I had the outline of the story in my head as we wrote the lyrics, but there were so many times throughout that like Phil would contribute a lyric that like reframed a particular section and like added an idea to the story that wasn't there before, and that was very cool to me. So there were a lot of these themes that honestly, there's even themes that we didn't realize were there until like we do an interview later, and the interviewer would ask us about that theme, and we're like, oh damn, we didn't realize that was there. So this album is for us is truly like, honestly, one of the themes is the theme of surprise, that there's a lot of this stuff that the album was something that was very organic for us. Like, even though it was a struggle and it took us a long time to get finished, it was something that we never had to force, and that all of these, almost that the thing has taken on a life of its own, that it would surprise even like us who wrote it.
Yeah.
Like, almost that we're getting to learn some things about it that weren't originally intended. It's sort of a greater than the sum of its parts kind of scenario, and that's one of the biggest things for me. That plus, I mean, obviously, I resonated with the thing that we spoke about earlier during during 4D printing, talking about taking on all of these peripherals surrounding music, because during that 7 years, I certainly found myself getting into the weeds of a lot of those peripherals, because as James mentioned about, like, you know, when you're stuck on something for that long and we're sort of not letting ourselves write new stuff, you know, you kind of find new ways to engage with what it is you're working on. And for me, that included diving very deep into the audio production process and, you know, testing plug-in after plug-in to find out how they could make our final product better. Just learning how to do all of these things that ultimately surrounded the creation of music, but were not themselves part of the creation of music. That one is a big theme that resonates with me significantly. And I mean, I think probably to a certain degree we all have experienced, like, a lot of what James was talking about earlier during that period of time, having the extreme focus on what it is that we were working on, like, to the extent that maybe our interpersonal relationships were placed under stress, right, during that time. And this isn't necessarily a theme of the album, but it's a feeling that I've certainly now been kind of encountering since we released the album, almost a year, basically a year ago. By the time this comes out, it'll have been a year ago.
Yeah.
And that is the aftermath. It's the what you do after, right?
We weren't prepared for that.
We were not prepared for putting it out, and the response, the reception that we would get, and now kind of trying to sort of having the blinders on, focused on that one thing for so long. Then it's finished, and it's like, oh, well, I mean, I guess we start working on the next thing, but the next thing doesn't have the same feeling that Opus did. It's its own thing. It carries with it its own set of emotions and experiences that now we're kind of having to, like, open ourselves up to wider horizons to sort of look at. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts about it.
I'm going to be a touch selfish. I want to touch on one more, and I think this will be a good one to outro on. I think because it's one your dad brought up, and I really like it, and I wanted to get a little bit of credit before we move on, was the idea of the passing down of experience, the passing down of knowledge, you know, the passing of the torch, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And your father brought it up one time, literally about passing on, you know, what you've worked on to your children, you know, which is something I've been thinking about a lot now that I have a little one. But I think it goes even a step further. was that we kind of touched on, in order to become proficient at your craft, there's going to take a lot of time and a lot of dedication, right? Well, how much quicker does that progress go when you have a knowledgeable mentor who is willing to pass down that knowledge to you?
Very.
You know what I'm saying?
Very
Like,
much faster.
I've seen this guy salivate over like, what was it? It was the how-tos and like mixing and sort of things. I forget what they're called. There's like a certain
Master
setup.
classes.
Yeah,
or whatever.
the master classes of like different things. He's like, oh my god, now I did a fucking master class. and you know, I know just about everybody in this room has had personal lessons of some kind, you know, where there was somebody in a mentoring role who was able to pass down that knowledge. And I think that's a very important theme. I kind of wanted to touch on it because I think, you know, that's not only part of what the album is about, but part of what we are about is about passing on our experiences. I think Opus is kind of a culmination of our experience over the last 7 years. And I think, you know, us sharing it is kind of a passing down of that knowledge. And I think us going through this and describing the story is another layer of that, as us passing down, you know, what it is, passing down some of the themes, why we wrote it, what we think is important about it, you know, why we dedicated 7 years, you know, is all wrapped up in this like lyrical spaghetti that has become, you know, what we hope to be one of our defining works. And I guess I hope you've enjoyed the video. Know that these guys are also teachers, so passing down of the torch and all that stuff. If you're wanting to do that more literally, feel free to reach out on any of the socials, No Spoon, or you can get a hold of James or Cole on directly. And
We're pretty good at it.
yep,
Opus is available to listen to right here on the YouTube channel, actually. Both in a full album stream, just a single video, and as individual tracks, if you'd like to. We've got a music video, that's Earworm. We've got a couple playthrough videos, a drum playthrough and a bass playthrough video, working on more of those in the future. The album itself can be streamed on like all streaming platforms, Apple Music, Spotify, etc. But most importantly, it can be purchased at our Bandcamp page. That is the way that you can support us the most directly.
Plug.
We've gotten that question before, like how can people support us the most directly, and the Bandcamp is the best way.
Yes,
you can buy the album digitally, you can buy them physically from us. We do have physical CDs. We should have merch sometime soon.
And the instrumental album.
Yeah, but by the time this airs, the instrumental version of the album will be going live on all streaming platforms as well.
Which we promise Phil gave us permission to do that.
He did. Or at least we imagine it. But here's the thing. For any of you guys who sing out there, feel free to record a vocal cover. Yeah. That'd be kind of cool. Good luck.
So, thanks for sticking with us through this, you know, I don't know, hour and a half, 2 hours, however long it's been.
Longer than the album.
Longer than the album, yes, it's true.
Well, keep an eye on like the other socials too, like Facebook, because we'll be playing the album out live soon. And
yes, we will. July 28th.
Yeah, we already got a show booked, so keep an eye out for more of those.
And last but not least, keep those questions coming.
Yes.
In fact, I think what sparked this video series was questions from, you know, you guys asking like, hey, what's the story about? Can we get a formal version of that? And so here we are. You got any more of those? Yeah. We'd be happy to make you some content for y'all.
Yeah, we read the comments, so
we're still a small enough band that we're managing our own socials and all that stuff.
Yep. Take advantage while you can.
I think we're all definitely very open with information. We're kind of open books as far as a lot of this goes. So we're happy to basically answer whatever questions you may have.
Yep.
So,
well, that's it for me, y'all. I think I'm ready to sign out.
yeah,
Yes.
likewise. Thanks again for watching, and hope to see you live sometime. Peace.
See you guys.
Later.
Fire.